Audrey Hepburn standing on Fifth Avenue in the pale morning light wearing that flawless little black Da Vinci dress.
Oh, and the string of pearls.
Yeah.
You can't forget the pearls.
Right, exactly. She's casually eating a pastry, staring into a jewelry store window. I mean, that is the image, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It's so iconic.
It's etched so deeply into our collective pop culture consciousness that it feels, well, almost permanent. For decades now, that single visual has just completely defined breakfast at Tiffany's.
Yeah, it translates instantly to romance,
Mm-hmm.
to this very sanitized, aspirational vision of New York cafe society.
Totally. The ultimate chic, carefree city girl.
Yeah.
But, and this is what we're getting into today, what if I told you that the actual character in the source material is, well, a traumatized teenage runaway who is actively aiding an international mafia drug cartel?
I mean, it is one of the most severe disconnects between a pop culture artifact and its original text in modern literary history. It really is.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
We have basically entirely replaced Truman Capote's 1958 novella with the 1961 Hollywood adaptation.
Because we like our cultural touchstones to be glamorous.
Right.
And palatable.
Exactly. But when you step back into Capote's actual prose, that iconic, polished image, it shatters into a million jagged pieces.
It really does. So today, our mission for this deep dive is to strip away all of that Hollywood veneer. We are going right into the source material to look at the raw, visceral narrative that Capote actually wrote.
Which is murky, by the way. It is undeniably dark, and it weighs into some very profound psychological, muddy waters.
Right. We are examining the psychology of someone who survives through pure, unadulterated reinvention. We're looking at the brutal, transactional nature of surviving in a major city, and ultimately the genuinely terrifying concept of absolute freedom.
Because you really have to unpack the defining contradiction of the main character, Holly Golightly.
Yeah, a girl who survives by being what her own agent calls a real phony. Someone who just flat out refuses to carry a single ounce of baggage from her past.
But who is relentlessly hunted by this existential dread she calls the mean reds.
So to understand that contradiction, I think we have to look at the architecture of her identity.
Or more accurately, the sheer mechanical effort it took for her to construct herself from the ground up.
Because when we are first introduced to Holly in the text, she is miles away from the polished, mature woman of the cultural imagination. She's a girl.
Yeah, she is exactly 2 months shy of her 19th birthday.
Think about that. And the narrator described her physical appearance in a way that feels almost feral. Her hair isn't a sleek, elegant updo at all.
No, it's described as a rag bag of colors.
A rag bag, right.
Yeah.
Has tawny streaks, albino blonde patches, yellow, and her apartment looks like she is either just moving in or just about to flee in the middle of the night.
Because it's entirely populated by unpacked crates and suitcases.
Exactly. And then there is her calling card, which is just brilliant. It is printed in this formal Cartier-style lettering, and it simply reads, Miss Holiday Golightly, traveling.
That single word, traveling, it operates as a manifesto for her.
Oh, for sure.
It isn't just a current status, It is her entire philosophy of existence. She recognizes her true origins as a profound disadvantage.
And we learn later that those origins are deeply rooted in poverty and starvation and trauma.
Right. So instead of trying to heal from that past, she simply decides to overwrite it. She treats her own history like an unacceptable draft of a manuscript and just throws it in the fire.
It strikes me that Holly is almost the 1943 analog precursor to a phenomenon we see all the time now.
Oh, the curated online persona.
Exactly. Think about that modern reality. We see people who completely scrub their digital footprint. They move to a new city, adopt a meticulously crafted aesthetic, learn a new vocabulary, and present this flawless, frictionless version of themselves to the world.
Yes, but doing that requires an unbelievable amount of vigilant maintenance.
Right, and the psychological terror of that existence is the constant humming fear of being found out, the fear of being canceled or exposed as a fraud.
And Holly is living that exact psychological terror, but she's doing it in the physical world.
In real time, without the benefit of a screen to hide behind. She recognized that her true, traumatized self was a liability in the ecosystem she wanted to inhabit. So she built an impenetrable aesthetic shell.
And we get a complete masterclass in the construction of that shell from a character named O.J. Berman.
Yeah, O.J. Berman.
He is a Hollywood agent who discovered Holly when she was just 15 years old, hanging around a racetrack in California. And Berman provides this incredibly sharp, cynical, but highly accurate assessment of her.
He tells the narrator that she isn't a standard issue phony, right?
Right, because she is a real phony.
Which, I mean, a real phony sounds like an oxymoron.
Yeah.
How do you achieve a state of genuine artificiality?
Well, Berman means that she has completely internalized the performance. A standard phony puts on an act for an audience, but they maintain a private, internal awareness of their true self. They wink at the camera.
Wow, but Holly doesn't wink.
Exactly. Holly doesn't wink. She genuinely believes the fantasy she has constructed. She basically has to in order to survive. Berman actually details the literal mechanical labor it took to create Holiday Golightly.
Because when he found her, her accent was incredibly thick.
Oh, it was so deeply rooted in rural poverty that they couldn't even pinpoint if she was a hillbilly or an Okie.
So to erase that, they didn't just give her elocution lessons, which is what you would expect.
No, they literally had to teach her to speak French first.
That is so wild to me.
They used a completely foreign language as a buffer so that when she eventually learned to imitate high society English, it would be scrubbed clean of her original regional cadence.
They essentially ran her entire voice through a linguistic laundromat.
That's a great way to put it, yes.
But the cost of overwriting your own operating system like that is a profound, devastating isolation. Because if you completely erase where you come from, you also have to erase anyone who actually knows your original code.
You become a stranger even in a crowded room.
Exactly. And Capote illustrates this isolation visually, which I love. Holly is constantly wearing these very dark prescription glasses.
Everywhere. She wears them in her hallway. She
Right.
wears them inside a dimly lit library.
Right. She is putting a literal tinted glass wall between her eyes, which are the most expressive, vulnerable part of a human face and the rest of the world.
And those dark glasses serve a dual purpose. They hide her from the world, but they also tint how she views the world. They reduce the glare of reality.
Because when you sever all ties to your roots, you have no safety net. You have no family to fall back on if you fail.
Right. So the real question becomes, how does someone with no family, no employment, and no safety net actually survive in one of the most expensive cities on Earth?
We have to look at the microeconomy she has built for herself, because she operates in a highly specific, very transactional ecosystem.
She doesn't have a job. She certainly doesn't have a trust fund,
No, she survives entirely on what she calls powder room change.
which is just fascinating.
It really is. She goes out to dinner at these incredibly swanky, exclusive mid-century Manhattan institutions, places like the Colony or the 21 Club. And when she gets up to go to the powder room, her date gives her $50.
And then usually another $50 for cab fare at the end of the night.
And in 1943, $100 a night is an enormous sum of money.
It's a fortune.
So she is funding her existence through an endless, exhausting rotation of wealthy and, frankly, deeply repulsive men.
And the text is completely unapologetic about the grotesque nature of these men.
Mm.
Capote doesn't romanticize cafe society at all. He exposes it.
Just look at Rusty Trawler.
Oh, Rusty. He is a millionaire, but he is completely emotionally stunted. He has been a tabloid fixture since he was literally an infant, enduring scandals and public scrutiny.
And as a result, he has never mentally matured past toddlerhood.
Not at all.
Holly is incredibly blunt about his psychology. She explicitly tells the narrator that Rusty feels safer in diapers than he would in a skirt.
It's such a disturbing image.
It is. He is a man who is absolutely terrified of adulthood, terrified of genuine intimacy, and terrified of women. He surrounds himself with women like Holly because they offer the aesthetic of a relationship without demanding any of the emotional substance he is just entirely incapable of providing.
And when Holly refuses to indulge his infantile delusions, like when she actually tells him to grow up, his reaction is sudden, petulant violence.
He tries to stab her, doesn't he?
He literally tries to stab her with a butter knife in a restaurant. This is the caliber of the men paying her cab fare.
Wow. And then you have O.J. Berman, who we mentioned earlier.
Right, who doesn't view her as a human being at all. He views her entirely as an asset. She is raw material, a commodity he tried and failed to mold into a profitable movie star.
And later in the text, we meet Jose Ibarra Chegar.
The prim, highly polished Brazilian diplomat.
Right. He is a man absolutely obsessed with his own upward mobility. To him, Holly is an exotic, entertaining American diversion. She is a temporary amusement that he intends to keep entirely separate from his serious, reputable life.
This is her ecosystem. It is artificial, it is dangerous, and it requires her to be constantly on.
But then into this highly manicured, cynical world walks a ghost from her past. And his arrival completely shatters the carefully curated holiday Golightly illusion.
The arrival of Doc Golightly is one of the most jarring, effective tonal shifts in the entire novella.
It really throws you.
The narrator encounters this older, weathered man loitering outside the brownstone. He is wearing a cheap, ill-fitting suit, and we find out he's a horse doctor from a place called Tulip, Texas.
The juxtaposition of this rural, deeply grounded man standing in the middle of chic, transient New York cafe society is just startling.
And what he reveals just drops the floor out from under everything we thought we knew about Holly.
Yeah, Doc explains that the sophisticated French-speaking girl upstairs is actually Lula Mae Barnes.
She was a starving orphan. Doc describes catching her and her brother Fred stealing turkey eggs and milk just to survive.
They had been passed around among what he calls mean, no-count people. They were essentially feral, traumatized children.
And Doc took them in, he fed them, he gave them a home, and then, at the astonishing age of 14, Lula Mae married Doc Golightly.
Which is horrifying to modern sensibilities, but it is crucial to understand that Doc is not one of the rats.
Right, which is the term Holly uses to describe her New York suitors.
He doesn't want a transaction. He genuinely, deeply loves her. He tells the narrator with such tenderness about how she plumped out once she started getting regular meals.
He talks about how he tamed a wild crow, specifically for her. He bought her magazine so she could look at the world outside of Tulip. He provided absolute safety.
But one day, despite all that safety, she just walked down the road and she kept on walking until she disappeared.
She just vanished.
Okay, wait, I'm struggling with this part because this is the aspect of her character that is so difficult to reconcile. I have to ask, is Holly a victim of a predatory male-dominated society, or is she a shrewd, calculated operator who is actively exploiting everyone around her?
That is the big question.
Because she abandons a man who literally saved her from starvation, a man who genuinely loves her and her brother, and she trades him for a rotating cast of New York millionaires she actively despises and calls rats. How is she not just a profound manipulator? Why make that trade?
That tension, well, it's the central moral ambiguity of the entire narrative.
Yeah.
Capote refuses to let you comfortably categorize her as purely a victim or purely a villain.
Right.
To understand why she leaves Doc and chooses the rats, you really have to dissect Holly's highly specific internal moral code, because she is incredibly articulate about her own ethics. She tells the narrator that she demands an unto-thyself type honesty.
Okay, but how does unto-thyself type honesty actually function in a life funded by powder room tips?
It functions through a strict separation of commerce and soul. Holly explains that she absolutely refuses to be an emotional crook.
An emotional crook?
Yes. She makes it clear she does not judge prostitutes. She has zero issue with the transactional nature of sex, companionship, or glamour. What she absolutely despises, what she considers the ultimate moral failure, are women who bang the guy and cash his checks while pretending to actually love him.
Ah, so she refuses to fake emotional attachment for financial gain.
Exactly. Her transactions with men like Rusty Trawler are entirely honest in her own mind. Rusty pays for her presence, her wit, the aesthetic value of having her on his arm, but she never promises him her soul, and he never asks for it.
So she is fiercely transactional, but fiercely emotionally independent. She has built a firewall between the economy she uses to fund her life and her inner self. The rats get the shell, but they never get to touch the core.
Precisely the opposite is true of Doc, and that is why Doc was a threat she had to flee.
Because Doc didn't want a $50 transaction. He wanted her.
He wanted her to settle down, to embrace domesticity, to be a mother, to be Lula Mae. Holly actually tells Joe Bell, the bartender who adores her from afar, that Doc's fatal mistake was trying to love a wild thing.
And her philosophy is that if you love a wild thing, you inevitably want to put it in a cage to keep it safe.
Yes. To Holly, domesticity, getting fat, reading magazines, being safe in a house in Texas was a cage that terrified her far more than the threat of starvation.
So she willingly trades the genuine safety of Doc's love for the dangerous, precarious freedom of the rats. Because the rats only want her surface. They don't threaten her core identity. They don't try to cage her soul because they don't even know she has one.
Exactly. But living as a wild thing, constantly in motion, without roots, without a family, without a safety net, that requires a massive psychological toll.
You can't just do that forever without breaking.
No, you cannot sever every deep human connection and exist in a state of perpetual transience without your nervous system eventually rebelling. That fear of the cage isn't just a metaphor for her relationships. It bleeds directly into her neurology.
It creates this constant humming anxiety. which introduces the most famous psychological concept from the source material, the mean reds.
The mean reds.
Hawley draws a very sharp clinical distinction between the blues and the mean reds. The blues are common. She says the blues are just when you're sad. Maybe you're gaining weight or it's been raining for 3 days straight. You're melancholy.
But the mean reds are a completely different animal.
Completely different. The mean reds are a form of nameless paralyzing dread. It is a full-blown physiological panic attack. She describes sweating, her heart racing, and being consumed by this absolute terror that something horrific is going to happen to her, but she has no idea what it is or where the threat is coming from.
It is free-floating existential anxiety. It is the psychological bill finally coming due for living a life completely unmoored from any stable foundation.
Right.
When you are perpetually traveling through life with no attachments, no home, and no one to rely on, you are completely vulnerable to the random chaos of the universe. The mean reds are the physical manifestation of that vulnerability.
And her cure for this panic is incredibly specific. When the mean reds hit, she doesn't go to a doctor, she doesn't drink, she jumps in a taxi and goes straight to Tiffany's.
And the way Capote describes her experience of this store is vital. It is entirely sensory.
She doesn't go there to covet diamonds, does she?
Not at all. In fact, she explicitly states that diamonds are tacky for young women. She thinks they only look appropriate on very old women with white hair.
Right. She goes for the atmosphere. She focuses on the lovely smell of silver and alligator wallets. She focuses on the quietness, the hushed tones of the salesmen in their immaculate suits.
We have to analyze the mechanism of why Tiffany's works as a cure for her nervous system. It really has very little to do with capitalism or materialism, at least not at its core. It is about the illusion of absolute permanence and safety.
Because Tiffany's represents an ordered, secure, perfectly controlled environment where chaos simply cannot enter.
Exactly. The lighting is perfect, the voices are low, the items are encased in thick glass. Nothing bad, violent, or unpredictable could ever happen to you inside Tiffany's.
It is the polar opposite of her traumatic, displaced childhood in Texas, where she and her brother were passed between abusive people and forced to steal just to eat. Tiffany's is a physical fortress against the unpredictable cruelty of the world.
It really is.
And I want you, listening to this, to think about your own version of Tiffany's. Because the mean reds are essentially just the modern human condition, and we all have our coping mechanisms.
Oh, absolutely.
When the world feels overwhelmingly chaotic, when the news cycle is inducing panic, when your personal life feels completely out of control, where do you go?
Everyone has a place.
Maybe your Tiffany's is a specific, quiet corner of a local bookstore where the smell of paper grounds you. Maybe it's a specific coffee shop where the barista knows your name and the routine never changes. Or maybe it's not a place at all. Maybe it's rewatching a specific sitcom you've already seen 100 times.
Oh, the comfort watch.
Exactly. You watch it because you know exactly what the characters will say, you know exactly how the plot resolves, and for 22 minutes you have absolute certainty in an uncertain world. You seek out that metaphorical smell of silver and alligator wallets to soothe your own mean reds.
That is exactly the function it serves. We all curate these controlled environments to self-soothe. But for Hawley, she requires literal mid-century jewelry store architecture to calm her panic.
She manages her anxiety by seeking out these temporary artificial sanctuaries and by keeping her life in constant, unattached motion.
But the tragedy of the narrative is that you cannot outrun chaos forever.
No, you can't. Fate eventually catches up with her. The walls she has so carefully constructed to keep out the pain of the world are torn down in the most violent way imaginable. Which brings us to the climax of Capote's text, the absolute collapse of the House of Golightly.
And the collapse happens in two distinct, devastating blows.
The first blow is deeply personal, and it strikes at the only genuine vulnerability she has left.
The telegram arrives from Texas, her beloved brother Fred.
He was the only person from her past she didn't erase.
He was the boy who let her hold on to him on freezing nights when there were 4 neglected kids shoved into a single bed. And the text reveals that Fred has been killed in action fighting overseas in World War II.
The manifestation of her grief in the scene is terrifying. It is not a quiet, cinematic weeping. It is a violent, feral, apartment-destroying physical explosion.
She physically demolishes her own sanctuary.
She smashes her record. She throws raw eggs at the walls, completely destroying the few possessions she has. And in the center of this wreckage, she experiences this haunting, hallucinatory vision.
She sees what she calls the fat woman,
Yes, she describes this massive, mean, red bitch rocking in a chair with Fred's body in her arms, just laughing at her.
The vision of the fat woman is a profound psychological projection. Holly has spent her entire life trying to outsmart pain by refusing to care about anything, but she heard about Fred.
She really did.
And when the random, chaotic violence of a world war takes him from her, she just cannot process the sheer randomness of it. So her mind creates an antagonist. The fat woman is her personification of a cruel, mocking fate. It is the universe laughing directly at her futile, childish attempt to escape the pain of human attachment.
And right as she is emotionally leveled by this loss, the practical legal foundation of her life completely crumbles. Her willful naivete finally trips her up. The Sally Tomato scandal breaks.
And it is a massive, incredibly public disaster.
The mechanics of the Sally Tomato subplot are vital to understanding her character's flaws, I think.
Oh, completely. For 7 entire months, Holly has been making weekly visits to an imprisoned mafia boss named Sally Tomato at Sing Sing prison.
She is being paid $100 a week by an answering service lawyer to make these visits, and she genuinely, truly believes she is just doing a good deed, getting paid to cheer up a lonely, pious old man who tells her he prays for her.
She views it as just another harmless transaction in her powder room economy.
Right. But the reality is that she is acting as a blind courier for a massive global drug smuggling syndicate.
Sally Tomato isn't just making small talk. He is giving her verbally coded messages, which Holly delightfully refers to as weather reports.
Weather reports. She would leave the federal prison, meet the lawyer, and pass along messages like, there's a hurricane in Cuba, or it's snowing in Palermo.
She was literally single-handedly coordinating international narcotics traffic for the mob.
It's unbelievable. It highlights the profound danger of refusing to engage with reality. Because when the federal authorities finally crack the code and raid the operation, Holly is arrested.
Yeah.
And the media just descends on her.
The newspapers plaster her face across every front page in the city.
They label this eccentric 20-year-old girl a ruthless gang moll. They print these stark, gritty photographs of her wedged between 2 hardened detectives wearing her dark glasses and a leather jacket. The Miss Holiday Golightly traveling persona is dragged through the tabloid mud.
But the most devastating consequence of the arrest isn't the threat of federal prison. It is the personal betrayal that follows.
Yes, let's look back at José Ibarra Jagar, the Brazilian diplomat. At this point in the narrative, Holly had actually let her guard down with him. She genuinely loved José. She was pregnant with his child.
She had been learning Portuguese. She was learning to cook. She was actively trying to build a future, a home, and a family with him.
She was finally, tentatively preparing to stop traveling.
And how does the sophisticated, respectable diplomat respond when the woman he supposedly loves is facing a federal indictment? He doesn't even have the courage to face her.
No, he has his cousin pack his bags, he flees to another hotel, and he leaves a cowardly, self-serving letter.
He essentially tells her, I love you, but my family name, my political career, and my reputation are far too important to be associated with a public scandal. May God be with you.
He completely abandons her and their unborn child to protect his own social standing.
This betrayal forces a massive confrontation with Holly's own internal moral code. She is facing years in federal prison. The man she loved has abandoned her. The mob boss she thought was a sweet old man used her as a pawn. The authorities offer her a clear way out, testify against Sally Tomato, explain that she was duped, and save herself.
And she absolutely refuses.
Her refusal to cooperate with the law is staggering, but it is entirely consistent with her character. She operates by a strictly internal, highly localized yardstick of morality, completely ignoring societal laws or objective justice.
Because she evaluates people based solely on how they treat her in the room.
Exactly. She tells the narrator that while Sally might have taken a slight advantage of her innocence, he was always an okay shooter with her personally. He was polite to her. Therefore, she refuses to help the authorities pin him down.
She would rather jump bail, flee the country to South America, and become an international fugitive than compromise her localized, deeply flawed sense of loyalty.
Wait, I have to jump in here, because this is the moment in the text where I find myself wanting to grab her by the shoulders and shake her.
Oh, I know the feeling.
Her absolute refusal to grow up, her insistence on viewing the world through the lens of a rebellious teenager, is what ultimately destroys her life. She treats a violent global drug ring with the exact same flippancy and amusement as when she dragged the narrator into a Woolworth's and forced him to steal a plastic Halloween mask just for the thrill of it.
Right, she openly admits she would steal quarters off a dead man's eyes if it contributed to the day's enjoyment.
It is a childish, solipsistic view of the world, and it has real, devastating consequences.
Your frustration is exactly what Capote wants you to feel. It is incredibly immature. But the tragedy is that her immaturity is a trauma response. If you refuse to recognize the rules of society, if you insist on living completely outside the bounds of normal human connection because you are too terrified of being hurt, you cannot suddenly appeal to society's justice system when things go wrong.
You're on your own.
She has built her life outside the cage, so she has no protection when the predators come. She has to flee. But her flight to South America forces a confrontation with the ultimate tragic flaw of her worldview.
And Capote sets up this final thematic climax with such powerful, heartbreaking symbolism. Earlier in the text, the narrator buys Holly a gift. It's a stunning, elaborate, $350 bird cage he found in an antique shop.
She had admired it through the window.
But when he gives it to her, she is deeply unsettled by it. She accepts the physical object, but she makes him swear a promise never ever to put a living thing inside it.
Because to Holly, the cage is death. To be owned is to be destroyed.
And this philosophy reaches its absolute breaking point in the back of a Cary Cadillac on the way to the airport. She is fleeing the country, fleeing the police, fleeing the wreckage of her entire existence. And she brings her cat.
The no-name cat.
Yeah.
She has lived with this animal for months, but she specifically stubbornly refused to ever give it a name.
She claimed that giving it a name would imply ownership. And they didn't belong to each other. They were just two independents who happened to meet by the river one day.
As the Cadillac is driving through Spanish Harlem, she suddenly has the driver pull over in a grim, garbage-filled, freezing alleyway. She takes the cat, drops it out the door onto the sidewalk, and tells it to scram.
She abandons it in this brutal, dangerous environment, justifying it to herself by claiming she's doing the cat a favor. She says it's a tough guy, and they never made each other any promises anyway.
It is a brutal, agonizing scene to read because she is projecting her own defensive philosophy onto a helpless animal.
But the psychological mechanism of what happens next is what shatters her.
The moment she tells the cat to scram, the moment the heavy door of the Cadillac closes and the car starts pulling away, her entire philosophy collapses under its own weight.
The reality of what she has just done hits her nervous system.
She breaks down. She forces the driver to stop. She runs frantically out of the car, tearing up and down the alley, screaming for the cat. But it's too late. The alley is empty. The cat is gone.
And in the back of that car, she delivers this chilling, devastating realization to the narrator. She says, "I'm very scared, Buster, because it could go on forever, not knowing what's yours until you've thrown it away."
That single line is the beating heart of Capote's novella. Holly Golightly is a brilliant, tragic study of the extreme cost of absolute freedom.
Her entire life has been a defensive strategy. To avoid being hurt, abandoned, or starved like she was in her childhood, she absolutely refuses to be caged.
She refuses to be tied down by a permanent name, by a husband, by a lease, or by a child.
But by refusing to be caged, by refusing to belong to anything or anyone, she guarantees her own exile. She exiles herself from love, from stability, and from the basic human comfort of belonging.
She throws away the only things that actually matter: Doc's love, the narrator's friendship, the cat's companionship, because she is too terrified to claim them. It's the ultimate tragic paradox. She demanded absolute freedom so she could find where she belonged, but her addiction to freedom ensured she could never stay anywhere long enough to actually take root.
And Capote brings this theme full circle back to the very beginning of the text, providing a haunting visual of her ultimate fate.
Years after she jumps bail and vanishes into South America.
Right. Mr. Yunioshi, the photographer who used to live in her building, is traveling through a remote village in Africa, and he comes across a local woodcarver.
And the carver has created this elongated, beautiful carving of a girl's head.
And it is the exact, unmistakable likeness of Holly Golightly. Yunioshi learns that she had passed through the village, shared the carver's mat for a brief time, and then rode away on a horse into the interior of the continent. She truly, literally, kept traveling.
She never stopped running. Her face is carved into a piece of wood in a remote village in Africa because she could never find a place safe enough to stop.
But Capote doesn't leave the reader completely bereft in the dark. There's a bittersweet coda to this narrative that offers a tiny sliver of grace.
Yes, the final resolution regarding the cat. The narrator, who has loved Holly in his own quiet, observant way, eventually keeps his promise to her.
After she flees to South America, he spends weeks roaming the freezing streets of Spanish Harlem, searching the alleys.
And one cold, sunshiny winter afternoon, he finds the cat. The cat is sitting in a window of a brownstone, flanked by warm potted plants, framed by clean lace curtains.
He has finally found a warm room.
She has found a place where he belongs, and the narrator notes that he is certain the cat finally has a name.
It is a profound moment of grace for the animal, but it serves as a stark, painful contrast to Holly's fate. The cat achieved the exact safety and belonging that Holly secretly craved, but was too paralyzed by fear to accept.
The cat found a home. Holly became a ghost.
So as we close this deep dive, where does this leave us? I think Capote is asking us to reflect on the tension in our own lives.
We all feel that pull, don't we? The tension between the desire for absolute freedom, the fantasy of having no obligations, no ties, the ability to just pack a bag, wipe the hard drive clean, and disappear into a new life, and the deep, fundamental human need to be tethered to something real.
The need to be known, to have a name, to be claimed by someone else.
It is the core dilemma of the human condition. We are terrified of the vulnerability required to truly belong to someone because belonging means they can hurt you.
But the alternative is the absolute freezing void of isolation.
We live in a society that constantly tells us to find our tribe, to settle down, to buy the house, to define our identities with absolute clarity and permanence. We are told to fill our cages.
But when you look at Holly Golightly, this traumatized, brilliant, fiercely independent girl who threw away her name, hid her eyes behind dark glasses, and ended up a wooden carving in an African village because she refused to ever stop running, is there a part of us that secretly understands her?
That's the real question. Is there a part of you that looks at the demands of domesticity and belonging and secretly wishes you had the courage to just leave the birdcage empty, put on your dark glasses, and keep traveling?